So hi, Lucy and Heba, thanks so much for joining. So we're going to be talking about our quite new partnership with BCS. So Lucy, you're obviously the Managing Director of BCS, so thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a minute as well. We've also got Heba, who's our Programme Manager at Wagon. So I'll also love it if you introduce yourself for us in a moment, and also tell us a little bit about your own personal bootcamp experience, because I know you've done the bootcamp as well. Lucy, it'll be great if you give us a couple of minutes introduction about yourself, BCS, and maybe your career as well, how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I've been in tech learning and development for about 30 years now.
Wow.
And the last 9 of those at BCS.
Okay.
So it's kind of I fell into it really accidentally. I was working for a software company and ended up doing some delivery of some of their training, and then ended up thinking actually education and training and helping people through their careers is a really important thing.
Nice.
And so the bit of the BCS that I work with, we're all about progression, and we're all about helping people progress into and through their IT careers. So it's kind of a really important thing for BCS. Our mission is making IT good for society, and making IT good for society means we've got to really focus on how we can grow and develop a really good, strong pipeline of IT professionals.
Nice.
And that's, a really important part of our relationship and partnership with Wagon.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions in a minute.
Yeah.
I'll just let Heba introduce herself quickly as well. Take it away.
Of course. So I did the bootcamp in web development about 2.5 years ago. It was very much a career switch for me. I'd worked in tech companies previously, but not in a tech role. After that, I started as a teaching assistant working at Wagon, and then transitioned into becoming the program manager. And I now teach on the web development bootcamp as well.
Cool, thank you. So I think today we're mainly going to be talking about quality and what the BCS accreditation really brings to the quality of the bootcamp at Wagon. So Lucy, do you want to tell us a little bit about how BCS accredits and what that can really mean for somebody who's looking for an accreditation for a bootcamp?
Sure. Well, there's lots and lots of different methods of training. There's lots of different things available. There's all sorts of stuff that you can get for free on the internet, and I think that creates a world where it's quite confusing for people who are looking to invest their time and their money into something that will really help them with their career. Yeah. So that's where the BCS accreditation stemmed from, because we kind of thought, actually, we've got a whole lot of people who are looking for ways of learning, and we need to help signpost to them what's a good way of learning and what's a quality program. So our accreditation of things like the Wagon Bootcamps really looks at how tech skills are delivered and whether or not there's a good solid program built around good learning objectives and learning outcomes in the tech space, but also very much looks at professional skills as well, because tech skills are great, but actually if you don't have any professional skills like team building and team working and ethical decision making to sit alongside them, then it's pretty hard to get the maximum impact from your tech skills. So we work with our accreditation partners like the Wagon, and we look in detail at kind of how you've developed your program, what you are looking at, what the point of it is, what you're trying to deliver to students, and what the makeup is across both those professional skills and also those tech skills. And we do an in-depth review of all of that, and then if we find that all of that stuff works well, then we give accreditation. And as part of that, individuals going through your bootcamps can then get themselves a BCS badge that they can use to help promote the fact that they've been through a quality, solid program alongside their Wagon certification, and can engage in the BCS community and membership and all of those things.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we can definitely look more into the BCS accreditation on top of the Wagon certificate in a minute. So it sounds like BCS really looks for quite a holistic approach to quality as well. So you've kind of talked about the hard skills and the soft skills that you look for. Do you think that that's changed in the approach that BCS takes to quality in any way as the years have evolved? You've been with BCS for 9 years. has there been an evolution, or has this always been the way that you've looked to certify quality?
So quality's always been an important thing, but accreditation is a brand new thing. And actually,
Okay.
Wagon were the very first organisation to get accreditation
amazing.
for their boot camps.
Yeah.
So we were really excited to do that with you. Predominantly, BCS has been about certification and about the assessment element of programmes. And that's the stuff that we focus on ourselves. So, you know, a lot of the stuff that we deliver is things like endpoint assessment, so the assessment at the end of an apprenticeship programme.
Okay.
But when we think about quality per se, the advent of more and more freely available and more widely available and you know, the sort of ubiquitous nature of training and certification and delivery and all of those sorts of things means that actually we think the world has become a much more confusing place.
Yes.
So we have always accredited the providers that deliver our certification programs, but this accreditation is really looking at the delivery of a program that doesn't link into one of our certifications. It's just, you know, if you're delivering a program, does it have a good quality background? Is it solidly built? Is it solidly delivered? Is it going to help people progress into a new career or progress into further education?
Yes, that makes sense, definitely. So did you see, do you think there was an industry demand for accreditation? And do you think this is something which employers look for from newly certified bootcamp graduates or people that have maybe learnt to code in any shape or form?
I think, so alongside Tech10, we also do a thing called Dev10, which is actually where we go to employers and we accredit their in-house delivery programs. So we know employers are interested in accreditation and the ability to look at these programs and kind of, you know, and to really have an independent assessment of whether or not they're delivering what they need to deliver. We know that employers are struggling with whether or not the badge that somebody has or the recognition that they're telling you that they have is a real thing. And does that translate into their ability to do the job on, you know, in fairly short order, rather than, you know, sort of people employing individuals and then finding that actually they've got to build a whole programme to train them into the skills that they need them to be able to exhibit. So accreditation is one of the ways that we can help signpost with Wagon and others to employers that actually what they're getting is a quality candidate, is a quality. I was just about to use the word graduate, and I don't. You know, graduate often means degree, but a graduate from the programme that you're running. So,
no, I think we do refer to our students as graduates when they graduate, really. So I think that's fine.
Good.
So just to touch on the Tech10 qualification that you've mentioned, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So Tech10 is the accreditation of the Wagon programs, and we are not precious about what we accredit in terms of what subject areas or the way that a program's the way that a program is delivered, whether it's delivered online, whether it's delivered in person.
Okay.
It can be any mix of any of those things. What we're really looking for is the way it's been designed, the way it's been put together, and the way it's being delivered.
Yeah.
Will it bring value to an individual that ultimately will then bring value to an employer, or in fact onto, you know, value to them moving on to a next level of education, if that's the alternative route that they choose to go down.
Nice. Okay, thank you. I'm going to move over to Heba now. Can you tell us a little bit more about the decision to get accredited by BCS and what you think it can really mean for the students?
Yeah, absolutely. I think off the back of what Lucy was saying, it's very much for us a quality stamp, especially for prospective students when they're making a decision of what bootcamp to go for. It can be quite an overwhelming decision. There's so much out there. But to be accredited gives them the confidence that we do deliver a solid curriculum and to a very high standard. On the other side of it, as you said, for employers, it gives them the confidence that if they're hiring the Wagon graduates, that they have been sort of through a program of the highest quality and will have these real hard skills that they'll be able to apply in the real world. So that's really what it is. And I think especially when you're going through a boot camp, you really care about what comes after that. Obviously it's short and it's intensive, but there's like a real intent behind it to change your career or change your life in some way. So it was really important to us, like the BCS offering of like the post boot camp careers services. because that's really like the end goal for whoever's going into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, for potential employers, when they're looking at candidates, I feel like it's such a competitive hiring market at the moment. And if they can see that somebody's bootcamp is accredited, maybe that's that extra sort of notch in the belt that they'll maybe be more likely to pick that person to go for an interview. If they know that their education's actually been certified, they're more likely to be able to bank on that person. Yeah, definitely. I think we get a lot of people coming to the Wagon who are seeking alternative education opposed to quite traditional routes. We have a lot of people who have maybe just graduated, they're seeking hard skills, or they're thinking about going to university, but they're not quite sure what routes for them yet. Do you have any thoughts on sort of why people come to the Wagon when they're trying to choose their career path?
I think the biggest part is that you're guaranteed hard skills at the end of it, and that's not always something that a more traditional path can promise. And obviously it's a much smaller investment of time, but like a sort of huge guaranteed outcome. And I think that's really what it is. From my own experience, I was in my like mid-ish 20s, and it just wasn't a stage in my life where I could invest, for example, in taking 3 years out of work and going to university again to upskill or reskill. So it was like the perfect amount of time that you could sort of have a little bit of a career break and then go out and have those hard skills ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's probably the key purpose.
Yeah. And was there anything in particular that attracted you to web development?
Honestly, I just thought this is a very cool skill. I'd worked around a lot of coders in the past, and had to sort of work with them on like building features, stuff like that, and always kind of thought I would like to be able to do this myself. I actually left my last job not knowing what I was going to do, so I was in like a very like exploratory phase of my life, and just thought what was lacking for me was that hard skill. I thought okay, I've got the soft skills, I can go and I can like sell and I can work in a team, but I can't actually build anything. So that's the reason I went for web.
Yeah, interesting. So Lucy, I guess you must have seen quite a change in trends of tech skills over the years. Can you tell me a little bit about any changes to the industry that you have noticed over the years?
So I think probably one of the biggest ones is about the ubiquity of IT. So, when you think about, it used to be quite a niche thing, and it's always been there. It's always been, in some shape or form, it's been there in the background for a very long time. But actually, when you think about tech skills now, they bleed into every area of every organisation. So, when you think about it sort of in separate ways. So, first of all, which industry are they in? People always used to think, well, tech skills live in the tech industry. Tech skills live everywhere now. So, how you do your shopping, how you order a repeat prescription, how you order a new wheelie bin, how you buy tickets for a concert. It's, it's everywhere, it's everything. And all of those traditional organisations that used to think that they were, retail bricks and mortar and banking, they're all tech industries now. And so tech skills are massively in demand, but they've always been in demand. When I started in tech learning and development 30 years ago, we had a massive skills shortage in tech skills, and we've still got a massive skills shortage. But what we've got is more and more people going into tech, but the demand is growing. And so actually it's just not keeping pace. So that bit hasn't changed. We've just still got this massive demand. The demand is getting higher because it's now everywhere. And then when you think about the way that tech skills work, they used to be, I'm going to be a bit sort of reductive about it just to make the point, but they used to be very kind of, they were for technical people who were in technical roles who sat in a technical team, and they aren't like that now. Tech skills are across lots of different roles. So if you look at things like data, data lives in a whole host of different roles. It doesn't just live in a tech role. And even if you are not a data analyst, actually you still need to know something about data for you to be able to help the rest of the business use data in the right way and to think about what the possibilities of data are. So, so the need for these skills is broadening and spreading out across the entirety of the organisation, but the need is still growing. So, so huge opportunities in tech. And I think, a bit like you were saying, Heba, there's kind of, you can come in with one idea, you can come in with one reason for coming in, but actually then the opportunities just, they expand exponentially.
Yeah.
And you kind of think, oh, well, I've come in to do some web development, and now you're a teacher. And it's kind of, it can go in any direction. And I think one of the things that people need to do, or one of the pieces of advice I would give people is kind of keep an open mind. So you go in to learn one set of things, but actually the opportunities that might present themselves are huge, and you should never stop learning and never stop exploring all of that.
And I think that's another sort of point on like why do a boot camp is I was amazed by all the different worlds that people had come from, all the range of ages, plenty of women also on my boot camp, and it does open your eyes that like you can change your career at any point. You can reskill at any point.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be when you're 18 and you're making that big decision of your life as to whether you go and study at university or not.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Just when you were talking about the tech skills and the tech kind of persona just now, I can picture in my mind this really stereotypical tech looking person, I guess, but actually that image doesn't fit anybody that I know or really that comes to do the boot camp. It's really changed, I think, who this industry appeals to, and people are coming in with all sorts of reasons and backgrounds, as you say. Lots of very creative individuals, whilst traditionally I think that the tech industry wasn't that appealing to creative individuals, whilst now it's seen as incredibly creative. Do you see, Lucy, a particular trend in any direction for careers? Or I'm going to redo that question, so I think it's a bit fluffy. What do you think the biggest growth industry is for tech skills or sector?
I'm not sure I could say that there's one. I think there's a load of different areas, but BCS does a whole lot of reporting and skills reports and all sorts of things. One of our most recent ones was sort of IT and business report, and both IT leaders and also IT professionals in terms of actual tech skills. All of a sudden cybersecurity is shot up like you wouldn't believe. So that's that is a critical thing for everybody these days. And cybersecurity, whilst you could think about that as, okay, so we need a load of people who are cybersecurity specialists, actually the need for cybersecurity skills now means that what we need is people who are coding and developing and thinking about the way that we handle data with cybersecurity by design, so that actually we're building those things in the first place, rather than in your web development. You don't want to build a website that's insecure to start with, because it's great that you can have a cybersecurity professional that puts all sorts of layers of protection on top of it. But wouldn't it be great if it was built in the right way in the first place? So cyber is a huge thing, and of course AI is massive, but AI is not one thing. It's many things. But again, when I talked about data earlier and everybody needing to understand a bit about data and how data works, and everybody needs to understand AI. And there's a huge there's like an AI doom thing going on where it's a bit Terminator and the end of the world is nigh. And we should stop. Elon Musk saying we should stop developing AI. It's kind of like there's a bit of a bottle, there's a bit of a genie, and it's unlikely you can stuff that back in there. So BCS has done a whole bunch of work around. Actually, we have an open letter that we've published that's got over 13,000 signatures so far. 1,300, sorry. 1,300 signatures. And just over-egging our part.
To be 13,000.
Everybody sign it.
To this podcast.
So over 1,300 signatures from all sorts of, sort of IT dignitaries. Talking about the fact that actually AI is a good thing, and what we need to do is just make sure that we're doing AI in the right way. So it's kind of we shouldn't stop it, and we couldn't, even if we wanted to, we couldn't. So what we need to do is to make sure that we use it in an ethical way. We signpost when it's being used. We make sure that when we use AI, we think about the inherent biases and all of those sorts of things. So cyber, AI, those areas, data's massive.
Yes, exactly. And obviously our web development and data science bootcamps are both accredited by BCS because there is such a big trend. And obviously we now have data analytics and we're launching data engineering as well because of these trends that are just sort of growing ever more, really. I think that's I think for us, probably one of the biggest growth areas. Anyway, yeah, and Heba, do you have any thoughts on the growth of data and AI and cybersecurity? Do you see any students coming wanting these careers in these industries? It's
definitely becoming more popular. I think for us, web development was always like the core of what we did at Wagon, and it's how we started. And it was definitely a more popular bootcamp, but it's actually kind of crazy how many more people are moving into data science. We also have quite a few cases of people who will do web development and then they want to move into data science
as well.
So that's probably like the biggest trend. We've also launched data analytics, which again, becoming quite a popular bootcamp. Again, it's, as you said, people who work in marketing or people who work in sales or sort of any area of the business, they're realizing the relevance of being able to be savvy with data. And using those. We've definitely noticed it on our boot camps.
Nice. Okay. And then going back a little bit to the conversation around diversity that we just touched on, it seems like, well, the Wagon has more women than the industry average, and certainly more ethnic minority students than the industry average. What are Wagon doing? Can you tell us a bit more about what Wagon is doing to support ethnic minority groups and women, especially in tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest sort of barrier for doing a bootcamp is costs. They aren't very accessible in terms of price. It's a big investment, again, especially over such a short period of time. So we do have a lot of different payment options now that we've introduced more recently to make it more accessible so that people can sort of, I guess, afford the bootcamps.
Yeah, absolutely.
From sort of what we run on the bootcamps to make it more sort of inclusive is we run a lot of workshops to try and encourage more women to come into tech. So these are workshops that we run for people who aren't on the bootcamp but sort of interested potentially in doing one. So trying to get as many women as possible just to see that actually you can do this, anyone can do this, and to remove that sort of like imposter syndrome that comes, which is quite common for women in tech. So those are really the main things. We're always sort of tracking our stats just to make sure that we are at least slightly ahead of whatever the industry average is, and then continuing to increase that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Lucy, for BCS, I know that you've done a big diversity report recently. Can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing to drive diversity in the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a long held belief of ours that if you want to increase the pipeline of people coming into IT, then one of the ways of doing that is to basically open up that pipeline to more people. So we've had a BCS women group for decades, and our current president actually is a lady called Gillian Arnold. She's one of the founders of BCS Women, and our immediate deputy president, so she'll become our president next year, is Professor Sue Black. She is also one of the founders of BCS Women, and so we've got we have had female presidents before, but this year we're
strong female leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is really great. So obviously they've got a big focus on making sure that we push around BCS Women. And so BCS Women is one of the 50 special interest groups that we have within BCS. We also now have a neurodiversity group. We have a group called Embrace, who are all about ethnic minorities and trying to raise their profile in IT. And we have an LGBTQI plus group called Pride, who are working on making sure that the IT industry is accessible to everybody, regardless of their preferences. So we're broadening out from women into a whole host of different areas, and each of those areas we run all sorts of different campaigns. But for instance, BCS Women have recently run the Lovelace Colloquium, which is the largest kind of gathering of female IT professionals getting together to talk about all things female and to feel supported and feel part of a group, because first of all we have to get them in, and then we have to keep them.
I was going to say retention is one of the biggest challenges now, isn't it?
Yeah, and so when you look at some of our recent diversity report talked about diversity, people talking about diversity are always talking about, well, you've got kind of diversity and making sure that you've got diverse hires, but then you've got to think about inclusion,
the long run.
Yeah, because diversity is great, But actually, if you don't do anything about your inclusion and you don't do anything, so you can hire
box tick.
You can hire working women, and you can say we're very pro women and we're going to have women only shortlists or whatever it is that you do to make sure that you get plenty of women in. But if you don't then have female friendly work policies, and I don't want to stereotype all women as being as having children, but a lot of them do, and a lot of them have primary caring responsibilities. If you don't allow flexible working, if you don't have the capability to allow them to work at different hours, and then you can make things very difficult. And so we do an awful lot around kind of different diversity groups. And I think something you both said earlier, actually, at different points, is there's kind of a thing about being able to see role models and being able to see somebody that looks like you
at all levels as well.
Yes,
it's got to be at all levels.
And so we do quite a lot of stuff around kind of careers inspiration and making sure that we that we include different minority groups and also women and what have you in all of those campaigns to make sure that people can see people that look like them being in IT.
100%.
Yes, absolutely. Because IT does unfortunately have a very, it's becoming outdated, but it did have certainly a reputation for, that tech individual, which, I just don't see these days at the Wagon. So I do really believe it's changing, but obviously it's just something that does need to be worked and, kept on moving. So on that, slight segue, but on that, so I know that BCS has been involved in government-funded boot camps at the moment. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, Lucy?
Yeah. So we're not a delivery arm for government-funded boot camps. So we work with other partners on their delivery. But actually, the way we get involved in those is more about providing, actually in a similar way that we do with the Wagon. So regardless of whether government funded or not, in providing some of that kind of ongoing support for people that have been through a boot camp. And so those kind of membership services, helping to introduce people into the community, helping to make sure that they have opportunities for mentoring and support, that they just have other people that they can call on to talk about their career, and making available tools that help people to understand what skills have I got, what skills do I need, where's the gap, how can I progress. And government funded boot camps are a great thing. All boot camps are a great thing. Government funding, helps a little bit with that accessibility that you were talking about.
Amazing. I think certainly it seems to be changing. I think there is more and more government funded boot camps available at the moment, and certainly in the current economic climate, it's something that more people are going to be looking for. I think we'll see a lot more from government funded boot camps in the future.
Yeah, I mean the government is investing heavily in waves of funding for those things. There's a new wave of bids just coming out now. It's really important that we make sure that we keep, in the way that Wagon has, that we keep the goal of employment at the end of those boot camps as, or employment or progression into some other level of study. But, the boot camp is not the be all and end all. It is the beginning of a journey for somebody. So important that we maintain that push into employment or further study.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Heba, maybe you can tell us a bit more about how we support students in finding jobs post boot camp. Obviously, we've got a 93% hiring rate, which we work very hard to maintain, especially in sort of challenging economic climate. Tell us a little bit more about.
Yeah, of course. I think the first thing to touch on is like the skills that they acquire on the bootcamp to make them more employable. And we've touched upon this before of like you really want hard skills, practical skills that you could go straight into a workplace and apply. So 3 weeks of our 9-week bootcamp are spent doing real life projects in groups, pair programming, again, like working in a way which you would within a dev team, essentially. And also learning the workflows that exist. So for example, on GitHub, like understanding how you actually work with the team. A lot of dev teams are also remote, so like how you communicate with one another and review each other's code, stuff like that. The final week of our bootcamp, so we call it week 10 essentially, is purely careers focused. So it's like a dedicated week to supporting students, getting ready, things like their CVs, cover letters, also even just working out what they want to do. So taking a moment to like reflect on the skills that you've gained. There's so many different alleyways, even within web development or data science, there's still so many routes you can take. So taking that time to work it out so you can have like a really focused approach to applying for careers. within the Wagon, we have a careers team. So again, a careers advisor who you can have like one-to-one support with, and that's sort of post bootcamp as long as you need. So there's a lot of things in place. And again, a lot of our students come from different backgrounds. Some of them have never had a job before, so they need like a lot of dedicated support. They've never written a CV, for example. And then we have people who, again, are like changing careers but have a lot of experience under their belt. So trying to tailor that to them so that they also get the most out of our career services.
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously it can be a slightly stressful time, I think, for some people. But having that sort of extra week, that week 10, to sort of really transition into sort of life post bootcamp, and then access to our career services as well for, it's up to 6 months afterwards.
Yeah.
At least.
No, definitely. And I think we have a big community of alumni, and that's another way that we sort of prove that our bootcamps work, is we have almost 20,000 graduates, I think, globally. And you see these stories of people who've come in. They used to be a chef, they've done a bootcamp for 9 weeks, and then they've gone into like an amazing data science role. So we also try to utilize this network and community so that our graduates who are feeling anxious can have those conversations with people who have done the bootcamp, and like understand what was your process after you did the bootcamp, like how did you do it? How did you also continue learning? Because as you said, it's just the beginning. And we can't lie. There's so much still to be learned to be on the bootcamp, but like you know how to learn, and you've learned the fundamentals where you can go and apply those skills already. So that's also a really important part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that our Wagon methodology for learning is so important, and it really works for a lot of students, I think. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Wagon methodology for teaching?
Yeah, of course. It's a big mix. So the format is you sort of have like a taught lecture. Our lecturers are industry professionals, and a lot of them have actually done the bootcamp. Again, just giving that reassurance to our students that like, okay, these people know what they're talking about. Like that's going to be me at the end of this. And then a big focus for us, so most of the day is spent pair programming. So we assign students a buddy. From their cohort, and that sort of is like randomly assigned each day so that they get used to working with people, like a diverse range of people, but also working with people who work in different ways. And again, it's how it works in the real world if you're working in a tech team. The sort of key thing for us is having amazing teachers, and that's such a big part of like the quality of delivery. So they have live support every single day. If they run into any issues on challenges, they can just raise a ticket with our teachers and have that sort of like in-person support. And then we run sessions which are live codes or recaps, you could call them, and that's very much like, okay, students, now it's like your time to like you're going to solve this challenge, and you've got the teacher here to like support you, but like you're all going to come together and work together to like sort of consolidate what you learned that day. So that's a sort of like daily format. And it is an overwhelming amount of content each day, but we try to make it as interactive and supportive as possible. And then I already talked about sort of like projects, which the format kind of changes. But.
Yeah, of course. But it's I guess there's sort of 4 key teaching methods, isn't there? I guess you get the lecture where you're very much kind of sitting and listening. You then get the pair programming, and then you get the live code. And then I guess there's projects as well. So you get like all of these different sort of methods of learning and ways of working with people, which, something will always work for everybody. Some people just love sitting at lectures and like absorbing information. They're like sponges. Other people really need that like practical experience of working through challenges all day. And then, people get so much out of the projects at the end of the day.
And the main thing is doing. And I think we've all sort of been through education where there's so much learning and theory and content, but then you don't really know what to do with it. So it's sort of getting the right balance of like, no, this is like the theory that you need to know, and you need to understand how this works just from a purely like content perspective.
And as well as, sort of understanding the context of how it works, there's loads of research. I couldn't quote the statistics now, but there's loads of research that shows you that actually sitting in a classroom being talked at doesn't really work. I mean, it works in the short term, but it doesn't work in the long term. You have to use the skill that you've learned. You have to use the information that you've just that you've just that has been imparted to you, which is why, you perhaps won't remember, but I remember when I was at school, we had to learn our times tables by rote.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason that I can do my times tables is because, in effect, it's a bit like learning a poem.
Memorize.
Yes, it's just memorizing.
Yeah.
But, it's not as helpful in the workplace to just have memorized a load of stuff.
Yeah.
You need to be able to, the workplace isn't the same every day. No. You've got to be able to adjust to what you're being asked to do today, tomorrow, next week. And so that I think your mix of let's have some lecture, but then let's put it into practice in our paired programming, and it's critical. To have all of
absolutely. I remember sitting in maths classes being taught percentages and fractions and asking, when am I going to need this?
Yeah.
And like, ironically, I do actually need percentages quite a lot.
I was like,
but the answer wasn't provided. Like, I actually was not given a straight answer that I could also really see as tangible and taken on board of when I would need percentages in my future. And that is, I guess, for me, the biggest reason why people come and do boot camps like this, an alternative learning route.
Oh, definitely.
So Heba, you kind of touched on just how intensive the boot camp can be. Obviously, there's so much content. Can you tell us a little bit about what Wagon does to support students through what is quite an intensive, accelerated learning experience?
Yeah, of course. It is probably one of the most intense things I've ever done. I think you're also putting a lot of pressure on yourself, and I think the sort of pressure that you feel is like, am I going to be good enough at the end of this? Like, I've put a lot into this, am I going to get out what I want out of it? I think the main sort of support things we have is, first of all, people. And I know that sounds sort of very basic, but being surrounded by teachers who have done the boot camp, they're there to help you. We also sort of train our teachers, and they naturally are like this anyway, but you're not just their teacher, you're also their like support. And if they just need a pep talk, that's also okay. Like you were there to settle them. Batch managers as well. I know that's sort of maybe not a very universal title, but each cohort sort of has a batch manager who is very much responsible for the progress and the well-being of all of the students in that cohort. They're usually their teacher as well, so they become a very familiar face. I think beyond that, we also sort of encourage a social atmosphere at the Wagon. Like, you really do you go to sleep dreaming of code, you're constantly thinking about it, and like, we need to almost force our students to have those moments, which is, you're just not going to think about it for a while, and you're going to let your brain like digest whatever happened today and then start fresh tomorrow. So there is a really great social side, and it does make it fun. And it should in hindsight, I had the best fun of my life over the 9 weeks, but I also learned a crazy amount. So I think those like the sort of main ones.
Well, I think it's absolutely okay to say that you can have fun whilst doing this. Because we do see people that become quite stressed during the boot camp and they stop learning. Like, obviously your brain stops absorbing information if you're too stressed, and then that adds to your stress because you're thinking like, oh my gosh, why can't I take this in? But it's because you're stressed and you need to be able to relax and take yourself away and manage your own expectations, I think, as well.
And I think during that period, nobody else in your life knows what you're going through except for the people that you were doing with.
Absolutely.
So it's really beautiful to see the friendships that flourish, and like students coming in and like really supporting each other if they see someone having a bad day. They're 100%. And I think you kind of forget that that you can go home and like explain like, oh, this happened today, and it's like no one really gets it until you're in it. So community is a massive one. I absolutely agree. Lucy, I guess BCS must have looked into the differences between accelerated learning and then traditional learning. Do you have any thoughts on, I guess, the pros and cons of either?
It's a bit of a glib response, but it's horses for courses.
Sure.
It really depends on what you're looking for. And, but if we look at the way that skills development and learning has developed in the last, couple of decades, and more recently, what we're seeing is, employers asking an awful lot for micro-credentials, micro-learning. They're looking for shorter, sharper, learning in the flow of work. And so whilst the boot camp, as you just explained it, the boot camp kind of is quite an intense process for somebody over a 9-week period. Actually, 9 weeks is very different than 3 years doing a degree, or 9 weeks is very different than 18 months doing an apprenticeship. they have their place.
Yeah.
But, but so does, well, I just want to do, 10 minutes on exactly how the VAT calculation works.
Yeah.
I know that's not a tech skill, but we were talking about percentages
Yeah,
earlier. And actually to have stuff like that available in the flow of work is really important. So, the importance, the pros and cons, your question was what's the pros and cons of these different things?
Yeah.
It depends what you're trying to get out of them, and it depends what you're going to do next. And I would say that there are no, there's no, one of them is not better than any other one of them.
There's no right answer or wrong
Correct.
answer, is there? Yeah.
I think what we have got is, which is a thing that BCS talks about a lot, because we are, we're massive advocates of boot camps, apprenticeships, and all of those different ways of learning. We also accredit 90% of the university degrees in computing in the UK.
Yeah.
So, so we are big advocates. We're a learned society. We really believe in that academic rigour. For what it's for that group of people. But what we do see is that accessibility to these things is very much shifted when you start to say, well, actually, we can put learning into the place where you work, so you're earning while you're learning. Because some people can't take 3 years out to do a degree. We can put learning into an 8, 9, 10 week period when you will be able to say, that's the point at which I'm going to do my learning. And it has a finite cost, and it doesn't necessarily have huge accommodation costs that go with it, and all of the other things that doing a 3-year degree have. So we're there are pros and cons, but basically there's no right and wrong answer. They all have their place, and they're all right for different people at different times in their careers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this just goes back to how we come across anybody and everybody. We've had 18-year-olds who really don't know what they're doing yet. They come and just they want some purpose to their gap year maybe, or they've just left school and they don't know if the university's for them, and they want to just try something and see what's next for them. We've had everybody right up through a 70-year-old who did our data science bootcamp a couple of quarters ago. Yeah, who was fantastic. Honestly, he was amazing. His son had actually done the bootcamp in Tokyo, I think the year before, had set up his own business off the back of it. And then John wanted to be a part of the company. And so he thought, if I do the same bootcamp, then I'll have the same skills and understanding of what's going on can be useful and essentially be employed by his son. So yeah, an amazing story. But, we get anybody and everybody in between.
And that's another great route for doing something like a boot camp is for founders, people who want to start their own business and they sort of want to take ownership of like building the website, etc. Or as a minimum, understanding what goes into it. So that they can then like hire a developer and like understand like what needs to happen.
Definitely. There's a real sort of entrepreneurial movement, definitely. I think, in the tech industry. Yes, definitely, because people come and do their projects, don't they? And often take those ideas into businesses.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And we have like quite a few success stories of people who have gone and raised huge amounts of money just off the back of their Wagon projects. Yeah.
Amazing. So Lucy, part of our partnership with BCS means that our students can become members of BCS when they've graduated. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means for students?
Yeah, sure. So it's really interesting talking about the difference in the reasons that people come on your boot camps. And actually, when we think about membership, we have members who are brand new to, so we have members who are still studying. We have members who have been in the IT industry for, decades and all points in between. So actually membership for us is not about being a particular type of person or in a particular role. It's about being interested in and wanting to get involved in, the IT profession. So we are a professional body, and that means that we're looking to help individuals become competent, ethical, accountable, inclusive IT professionals. It's really important for us that that's how the IT industry develops. And so your students, regardless of who they are, where they've come from, what age they are, which course they studied, there will be a place for them in the BCS community. I think I said it earlier, but we've got over 70,000 members. We have over 50 different specialist groups. We have over 50 different regional branches. We run more than 1,000 events a year. So there's loads and loads of things for people to get involved in.
Great.
On top of all of that, there's all sorts of tools and things that become available to them as members. And so we use a thing called the Sophia framework, which is a horrible acronym, but the skills framework for the information age, which basically is a competency framework that lists all the different competencies and skills that you might need in loads and loads of different job roles.
Yeah.
And so, as we spoke about earlier, Heba, people kind of, come in thinking that they're doing a boot camp for one particular reason, but then something sparks their interest and they might kind of decide that they want to do something else. So as a member of the BCS, not only do they continue that availability of lots of people to talk to and the community of people to carry on that career journey with, but there are also tools that enable them to in a very tangible way, map the skills that they have, that they got from their boot camp, that they've now learnt from the career that they're in, that they brought from their time when they were working as a chef in a restaurant, whatever it is, they can map all of those skills in a transferable way, and then they can look at, okay, so what have I got, and what does that mean I look like? So, oh, look, I've got sort of 75% of the skills that I might need to be a business analyst. I don't even really know what one of those is. I can go into some webinars and bits of information that will help me understand what a business analyst is, and I can see whether that's something that I fancy doing as a career. Because half the battle, I think, with kind of getting people into IT and keeping them in IT is that there's such a breadth of roles and so many different things that they could be doing. So membership, through access to community, access to tools and techniques, and and bits of software and loads of events, just can help people to open their eyes to all of the opportunities that are available. And we're really excited to have the Wagon graduates come and join us as part of that.
Yeah, great. I mean, it sounds fantastic. It's certainly in line with, what we really aim for students to get out of Careers Week is their career pathway. It's the beginning of their journey, and just to give people that clear idea of what steps they want to take next. Things change, that goes without saying. Life is so complicated these days, but absolutely, I think you're right. Having that pathway, having a chosen route that works for you, that takes on board your past experience is just what we can really do for people in this day and age. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. So I think this is going to be my last question, and I will release everybody. Lucy, what's next for BCS?
Lots and lots of different things going on with the BCS. We've got our finger in so many pies. We've got a very busy season coming up as we move into all of the party political conferences.
Okay,
because it's really important that the BCS is seen and can have influence around kind of the important things that whoever's going to be in government next pays attention to, and making certain that we keep fighting the fight for good skills, keep fighting the fight for funding to help support all of those things. We're doing a whole bunch of CPD, so again in the membership proposition we'll launch a new platform, BCS Discover, which will launch in September. So that's very close too. And on our apprenticeship side, we're huge provider in the apprenticeship space, a huge endpoint assessment provider in the apprenticeship space, and we're kind of looking at a little bit about we talked earlier about the kind of the way IT careers don't necessarily follow a linear path. We're now looking at whether or not there are other industries that we should be thinking about working with from an apprenticeship perspective, because actually they've got such a massive digital relationship. They're not typically a tech career, but really they're technical. So lots happening for us.
I mean, as we said, IT and the tech industry touches everybody now, doesn't it? So that's brilliant, amazing, very exciting. Heba, what's next for the Wagon?
So for the Wagon, imminently we have a data engineering bootcamp starting, and the reason for that is, as a lot of businesses are moving into more of the automation side, it's us just trying to keep up with the trends in the market. So that's a very exciting one that we're launching. And as we kind of spoke about, our boot camps sort of at their core are for people who are reskilling, but we also want to tap into the market of people who are upskilling. So they're in a certain career, they've maybe plateaued or want to keep developing their skills. They want to be better at their jobs. So we're also launching some skills courses in a number of areas, which is, they're short, they're quite snappy, but they're a really quick and efficient way of sort of gaining harder skills so that you can continue working and being better.
Amazing. Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see what's next for both of you.
Thanks
a lot.